2014. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of reflection for our troops who keep us free. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Lisa, would you read the Open Public Meetings Act announcement?
According to the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given to the Daily Record. Notice has been posted in the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, and notices were sent to those requesting the same.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Present.
Mr. Ferrante? Mrs. Leibau?
Here.
Mr. Perkins?
Here.
Mr. Roman?
Here.
Mr. Nacastro?
Here.
Mr. Mania?
Here. Okay, first on the agenda is a discussion item, the Park Place sewers.
I could start that if you like, Mr. President.
Please, Mr. Canning.
Sure, thank you. As council will recall, this issue has been before council now several times over the last 14 to 15 months. There's been extensive research. You've heard testimony and talk from many of the residents, many of who are here today, both for and against this. We've heard from the township engineer. Where it stands currently, as we had apprised council back in fall, was that this project would be listed within the 2014 budget, which it currently is. Now, there's no 5% raise that has to be done towards that line item, as we're a self-liquidating budget this year. So if council so desires to move forward with this project, you would have to raise that money through a bond ordinance and go forward from there. If council does not desire to go forward with this project, you don't have to do anything. You just, would not prospectively act and raise that money through bond ordinance. So I know there's many residents here, and I'm not sure how council feels, whether you want to hear everybody tonight or not. It's not for me to decide, but that's what is before council tonight on this project. I've tried to, over the last year and a half, from surveys to engineer testimony, to really try to apprise council as to where we're at and what the facts are. So that's what lies before you.
Thank you, Mr. Canning. I'm going to ask on Councilman Perkins, who's probably the longest-standing member on the council.
Sitting
I'm
member.
sure he has long memories of this project. Mr. Perkins, would you give us an overview, please?
Sure, Mr. President. Back in 2008, we had originally been entertaining this project. At that point, the engineering estimate was done. The cost for all of us on council, including our now mayor who was on the council, was that it was definitely cost prohibitive to be spread among the residents just down in that area. Subsequently, we had the business administrator, Bill Soul, send out a questionnaire, whether who was in favor, who wasn't in favor, and as history will pan and prove empirically that there were people that didn't feel that the questionnaire was fair, it didn't address their concerns. Subsequently, it died. 5 years later, in 2013, it came back before the council again. Subsequently to that, our new business administrator, Mr. Sean Canning, sent out a questionnaire on pros and cons. Again, empirically, we have shown that people were concerned that the questionnaire wasn't correct, it didn't explain purposefully, it had an exorbitant fee that was attached to it, which was strictly an engineering estimate based upon Gene's expert knowledge of what was to take place. The surveys that came back ultimately show that the majority of the people were not in favor of the sanitary sewer extension down in Flanders, in the old Flanders section. We had our assessor, Mr. Jack Marchione, who was here, who we queried quite extensively on the one evening onto what the improvements would be and if the ratepayers in Flanders themselves in that section would be the only ones that would be borne the cost of the sewer extension. We were apprised that evening that these folks would only be assessed the improved value on their property, and that the balance of the project would have to be assessed to the rest of the Mount Olive Township. Now, approximately $2.50 for every $25,000. If we've got $130,000, we've got $15 extra to every resident in Mount Olive Township to get an engineering design study done. The mayor had set up, and at his recommendation, he had set up a committee to meet to discuss what possible options could take place. Mr. Ratner, a former council member, had apprised us of low-pressure pump systems that could possibly save a decent amount of money on the project. Gene then came back to us with his proposal on what it would take for the design and his estimated cost of approximately $130,000. At that point, the council had the information from the property owners. It was now brought back that the project would only encompass Park Place, would then run the rest of the way up Main Street until it tied into the back of Flanders Crossing. Ultimately, by township ordinance and state law, those people on Patriots Path would be required, since their facility, you can't just pass by a sewer lateral and not tie into it. They would then also have to tie into it. There was, I don't believe, anybody on Patriots Path that was interested in tying into the sanitary sewer system from Flanders. A review of the properties Mr. Canning had provided to us, out of Park Place, which was the majority of the people, there were 14 votes in the affirmative for both options number 1 and options number 2. 2 no votes were placed for both of those options. It bears mentioning that out of those 14 properties, 4 of those properties are owned by United Methodist Church. 6 of those properties are owned by Phyllis Shelton or Phyllis Shelton Family LLC. So 10 out of the 14 properties are owned by 2 individuals. 3 of those properties that fall under the Shelton family have illegal residents that are on there. One of them, they were notified in 1999 by the planning department that that structure could not remain. They now are renting 3 of those structures out, and I believe it was at the request or suggestion of then Council President Ms. LeBeau, who's sitting next to us, that Sean Hopkins presented us with findings on what had transpired and confirmed that yes, there physically are what at least at one point was a barn, the other one may have been a garage, and they have been converted into living units. I did a research through the health department and asked what the status was on the septic systems that were down there, because that's been a point of contention. People have said, well, the septic systems are really bad and this is terrible because Drake's Brook is behind it and, you know, it's a trout stream. There are absolutely no history of any abnormalities or history of any complaints on the certified pumping test reports that have come back. Now, one question that I do have, and it's more in a basis of fact, is that for the 3 properties that have the additional residences on them, that each one of those properties has been pumped close to 9 times since 2004. They're pumped on an average of annually. Now, either that is an excessively small tank, and I don't necessarily believe that. I believe that because the 3 residences now have renters in them, which is in violation of the zoning law, that they are overloading the tanks. I sat here at the last meeting, Mr. President, and I said that I didn't feel that the taxpayers of Mount Olive Township should be burdened with this. The residents down there either have the room to put a mounted system or some other. Most of them have septic systems that are working in fantastic condition. I checked with NJEIT today. We have talked about the possibility of a grant that may be able to be utilized to offset this cost. NJEIT does not administer grants. They have low-interest loans. They have a principal-only loan. Most of what they have is Sandy-related, And I think we'd be hard pressed, since we are on public record back into 2008, that we could blame this on Sandy. There is no funding that's available from that source. Given the facts that are there, I'm going to be cautious on using the word the blatant disregard of zoning laws. There are absolutely no records of any zoning permits, building permits, or any permits through the health department for these 3 additional residences on these properties, which I would assume is exacerbating the issues with the septic systems that are down there. I'm not inclined, again, to take the small amount of research that I've done through the real estate, New Jersey Realtors Associations, as well as other realtors that I'm aware of, and professional assessors, and ask them what the difference would be if I built 2 houses side by side identical, and this one was tied into a public sewer system and this one had a branding new septic system, what the difference in assessed value would be. And it is minimal. Why is it minimal? When I had a septic system, it was mine, and I got it pumped out every 3 years, and it cost me about $300 or $400, and I had to dig out the lid. If you're on a public sewer system, you're paying about $180 some odd to $200 every quarter, plus any special assessments that were done for that improvement. So the actual improved value or increased on the assessed value is kind of negated and becomes de minimis when you look at the cost of maintaining your septic system versus B, having to pay a sewer system fee all over. Based upon those facts, I am reiterating my statement from last year. I am not in favor of this. I will not be voting for it. There is no way that I am going to ask the residents of Mount Olive Township to subsidize a sanitary sewer system to the benefit of approximately 20 people. And any correlation between this improvement being the same for assessing the rest of the township, the same as we did with the Bud Lake sanitary sewer system, is not apples to apples. There are thousands of people that we connected in the Bud Lake sanitary sewer system and miles of road. 20 homes and 2 miles of road is no correlation between those two. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for that, for giving us that information, Mr. Perkins. Mrs. Laybow?
One of the reasons why we brought that up in 2013 was the DEP changed their regulations with cesspools. If you have a property that has a cesspool, when you change title, you have to put in a septic. You can no longer have a cesspool. In Old Flanders, specifically on Park Place, there are several of the homes there do have cesspools. So if somebody tries to sell their house, they have to put in a septic. The problem is those homes right there on Park Place don't have enough property for a septic, and most likely because of the high water table there with Drake Brook behind it, they won't perk. So you have to put an above ground system, which will be about $30,000 to $50,000 depending on what they have to put in. Also, Mr. Perkins didn't mention in his summary is that also St. Elizabeth's Church needs sewers to continue with their projects, and that affects about 1,600 parishioners that go to that church. Also, the Methodist Church. So that's why that area there, having the sewers and having it put in will improve that area. I can speak as a real estate agent as far as a dollar value for a septic versus sewers. People prefer sewers. And while, sure, you do have to pay in, well, the Bud Lake sewer system, we pay $180 a quarter. However, you don't have to worry about your septic system going, you go everything through the sewer utility. And the problem is that, okay, so you have to empty your septic system every 3 years, but then your septic goes, you're looking at $25,000, $30,000, $35,000, $40,000 to put a new septic in if it perks. So it's a cost that you have to come up with all at once. So I will say, and I go through this with clients all the time, they will not even look in some areas if it has septic. They just want sewers, that's it. So that's where, is it a dollar, I don't know, does it make one house side by side, as Mr. Perkins said, more valuable than the next? I know myself, I would prefer to buy a house that has sewers instead of septic, because I went through septic nightmare when I had a septic. And as many of you have heard me say in the past, once I finally, and I had to empty my system every other month. I had to empty the tank, and it turned out, which I didn't know at the time, it was just a cesspool. It was a small tank, and every other month we were calling out the company. We'd dig it up and they'd empty it out, and then 2-3 months later, and all we had at that time was a family of 3. It was myself, my husband, and a baby. I mean, we weren't using an exorbitant amount, but we had to keep emptying out this little tiny tank. And also, as far as Mrs. Shelton goes, with her properties, as I understand it, like the one renter tenant that she has, it's one person. I think all of them are just 1 or 2 people. It's very minimal, and they're at work. So it's not like they're using, it's not like it's big, huge families putting a lot of use in there. And as far as the letter from Mr. Hopkins, what I said at that meeting several months back was he wanted information on how many properties were on each lot. And I said to him, well, you know how to look that up, look it up. It was not that I asked him to go after Mrs. Shelton or anything like that. That was the clarifying on, and I don't know why he included me in on his letter. But, so that's, my opinion is that it is an improvement to the area. It helps out the Methodist Church right there desperately needs the sewers. St. Elizabeth needs the sewers, and the residents are there. There are some businesses. I think there's 4 or 5 businesses along that stretch that also would like to have the sewers. The one person that said no, that property is different than the rest. Most of them are only a few feet from the road. His property sits back about 200 feet. So his lateral to the sewer system is going to be rather long to get to his house. That was his objection. Everybody else that lives on that street was very much in favor of having the sewers put in.
Thank you, Mrs. Laybaum. Mr. Roman.
First off, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Perkins on an excellent summary. It brought all the issues succinctly to the fore. When making this decision, I think one of the things that we have that I, for myself, keep thinking is, the cost and the benefits to the residents as a whole. I think I've yet to see any demonstration that there is a health issue with going forward and installing these sewers. I have not seen anything of the like, and that would be the only decision that would reason that would sway me into approving this, because this is going to be a benefit presumably to very few people, and the cost would be borne by the majority of Mount Olive Township. And I think that's something that should be weighed in when it becomes the benefit to a few and the cost to many. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Nicastro.
Yeah, I agree with all the points here, and the same thing in my view of this is the same way. We have a few homes that would benefit. The majority won't. I mean, the majority would if they're forced on the system. We had a lot of people who did not want the system, which is another concern of mine. They came here, voiced their concerns just as much as the people that want the system, and it becomes a balance of, you're going to force it on people that don't want it for some people that do. And that's a problem for me. And like Mr. Roman said, I haven't seen anything that's a health problem. I've done the research. I'm on the Board of Health now, trying to find out information. There's nothing out there that we can find, as Mr. Perkins said, that there's any issues with septics, any issues with anything. And I do sympathize with the homeowners. I understand, Ms. LeBeau, with the cesspools can be an issue, and we might be able to have to try and find some other ways to help them in that case. But the majority of the people are on septics, like many people are. And if there's no issues with it, I'm not inclined to put the burden on all the residents for 16 homes of what we're talking about right now, when the majority don't see them because people are forced to get on the system.
Thank you, Mr. Nicastro. Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to clarify on the research that we did, and I'll read down. We'll just go down Park Place because that's where the major concern is. Number 4, Park Place has tanks and pits. 6 is unknown. 8 has no file. Number 10 has a cesspool. 12 is a converted cesspool to a tank, 14 is a tank and pit, 16 is a new approved system, 22 has no file, 9 is a tank and a pit, 11 is a tank and a pit, 15 is a tank and a pit, 19 is a tank and a disposal, 25 is a tank and a trench, 27 is a tank and a pit, 33 has a cesspool, 31 has a tank and a pit. 2 cesspools.
Well, there's some
Well,
unknown.
if the only way I can put this, and I appreciate sometimes what the DEP does. A couple years ago, DEP made the Well Protection Act, and Mrs. LeBeau, I know, is familiar with it, and anybody in real estate is. If you have a private well and you go to sell your house, you have to have the well tested, and any issues with that well must be corrected at your expense before you can sell the house.
Anyone's got a cell phone, please turn them off.
So
Thank you.
that issue needs to be corrected before you can sell the house. That's a DEP regulation. It's not like you can just skirt that and say, okay, well, the guy will take care of it. You need to rectify it. Now, if you bought a house with a cesspool on it, and the DEP now turns around and says, if you go to sell your house and you have a cesspool on it, you have to do some remedial action. While I feel for these people, I have a private well. I pray in 7 years, if I'm lucky, that I can sell this house, that there's no issue with the well. If there is, I'm going to have to pay for remediation. I don't have a cesspool. I'm on the Bud Lake sanitary sewer system, which I've been heavily assessed for over the 15-year period.
I too.
And so has Mrs. LeBeau and quite a few of the rest of us. For the folks on the cesspool, while I feel for them, that's the burden that you pay for buying that property. It doesn't alleviate the fact that at least 3 of those properties have dual residencies on them, and whether it's one person that lives in there or 6 people that live in there, they are living in there illegally, and they should be removed. Now, that is an issue that needs to be taken up somewhere else besides this council right now. But what I can tell you is there are no records of any health concerns with any of the septic systems. You've heard from our professionals. We had them here last year. Our health officer was here, other folks. There's no issues. There's nothing for me to stand on as a legislator who has to weigh and look at these folks and say, I'm either going to tax you or I'm not. I have to pass the laws, and the laws have to be fair to everybody. They're not going to be fair to everybody if I say, yes, that's fine, I'm going to give 14 properties on Park Place, 10 of them are owned by 2 individuals, so that leaves the other 4, you guys are going to benefit, but you know what? Up here in Bud Lake and every place else, you're going to subsidize this for the next 10 or 15 years. I can't do that. In good conscience, Mr. President, I just can't do it.
Let's see if Daniel you have anything?
I
Want
was
to add to this?
no, I was just I was not here. I didn't see the statistics, whatever that were the statistics that you were talking about, the pros and cons. But I feel that the sewage, right? That's what we want to put there. The reason why I would be on that side is that I feel that sewage, although it benefits few people, but it increases the value of the property of the people who live there. And so I have never known that the sewage is put in because of health problems. That's another point. But anyway, because of my, I don't have a sewage myself. I have a well, but I feel that even if there are 2 people, 3 people, 10 people who can benefit, we can give them the benefit of doubt and, give them the sewage, because when they sell their houses, the value will go up and the town will get their portion of the whatever is you pay when you are selling your land or something like that. And so I would support the idea of having a sewage on the ground, although it benefits a few people. And I also don't feel that health should be the factor. The factor shouldn't be.
Thank you, Mrs. LeBeau.
One of the other issues, everybody keeps saying that they haven't heard of a health issue. We have Drake Brook right behind there. And right now, the septics that are there and the cesspools that are there are draining into Drake Brook. That's where they go off into in the land. And again, you keep forgetting the fact that it's not just Park Place, we're also including St. Elizabeth's, who has been asking for the sewers for a very long time and need it for expansion that they want to do on their property, which is going to benefit several thousand people, as I understand it from speaking with some of the representatives from the church. So it's not just the residents who live right there on Park Place. It's the parishioners from the Methodist Church, parishioners from St. Elizabeth's Church, along with the businesses on Park Place and the residents on Park Place. So it's not just contained to that little strip right there. And we're talking, I think Mr. Perkins said $15 per taxpayer for the rest of the township. And with all of us, I mean, there are many, many times we all pay money in our taxes that maybe we don't use at all. You know, we have tons of people who don't have any children, yet they pay an extremely large amount of money for their taxes. I know last year I was very excited when our budget, our increase was like $60 a year per your average homeowner, yet when I got my increase on my taxes was $1,449. You know, I mean, that was for the schools. I don't have children in the schools anymore. You know, so there's many of us. So we're talking about a very small amount of money that'll be assessed that's going to improve Old Flanders, our historic district, that's going to benefit the parishioners at St. Elizabeth Church, parishioners at the Methodist Church, as well as the businesses that are right there. We have a barber shop, we have an auto mechanic shop, we have an attorney's office, and we have a dry cleaners there. We have, I think, 4, 5, 6 businesses in that strip all total that will all benefit from having the sewers. And we won't have those Turkey Mound septic systems going in. But the big thing is, I know that with the Sheltons on their property, they put in a swale on their property in the back to help divert some of the water and the flooding that was going on. When that flooding was going on, there was a lot more sewage that was going in. And also, as far as the health department goes, the records, I've spoken to several residents in that section, and while they've had problems, they have to keep emptying their systems. They don't really want to say anything to the health department because they don't want anybody to go in and force them to get a septic system. And I've heard that from several of those residents. And that's why, as far as the records at the town go, that's why they're not seeing it. And I don't blame them. If it was me, I'd keep emptying my tank as well, rather than put out $35,000 for a new septic system.
Ms. Slayback, I gotta ask you a question. You said the septics are draining into Drake's Brooks.
When
Was there a test done to,
there was not tests done right now, but
so how
that's,
do we know that?
well, that's a little bit obvious, John. You have 20-something residents there, and they're all either cesspools or sewers, or cesspools or septics, and it's, when it goes through the pits, through the drainage pits, it's going somewhere. It's going, and that's the whole reason why DEP wants to have, why they put in the Highlands, they don't want that any of the sewage or anything going into the waterways. And that's another, I mean, we could run tests, but I mean, it's a little bit on the obvious.
I can remember years ago, the homes along the lake, people were draining their sewer right into,
That
their
was
waste right into the lake. But we put a dye into the water of the toilet, flushed the toilet to find out if it was happening. So that's why I'm asking you, was there any test done? Just to say it is without a test.
Yeah, but also I know that with the Bud Lakes, once we had the Bud Lake sewer system put in, the quality of the water of the lake improved tremendously, because it's, I mean, it might, maybe it dies, maybe it's not going obviously in there, but you have several hundred homes around the lake, eventually that seeps through. Same thing with, well, they have these, I know it's a little bit off topic, but they keep having these collections for medication. They don't want people flushing medication down the toilet or putting in your garbage, because everybody does that, eventually has a cumulative effect. Same thing with the energy saving light bulbs. They want you to dispose of them properly, because you throw them in the garbage, it gets in the landfills, and it has a cumulative effect. So can you definitively say, okay, you have feces going right into Drake Brook? No, but you have, you know, over time, it starts to collect and it goes down the river. You know, John, you've been on the planning board for many years. It's a cumulative effect. And that's how it, that's how these things work.
Mr. Rowland?
Ms. Leyva, I mean, I have to take contention with you regarding the Drakesbrook issue. Nobody has ever had any testing demonstrating of such, and for you to repeat that line that the Drakesbrook is getting contaminated, with all due respect, is
I didn't say it was getting contaminated from the residents who live there, is what they're telling me.
What you're providing is anecdotal evidence. The people that you speak to, again, hearsay, anecdotal. We can only make decisions based on what is in writing. If there is a health issue, then the health department, we have something to go on. If the Drakesbrook is being contaminated, the DEP, I'm pretty sure, would have provided something by now indicating as such. There is no algae bloom going on there. There's nothing so far that's even a precursor as to an issue that's going on. So, and the other, you're saying the parishioners would benefit from it. Are they currently suffering under the system that is going on now? Are the businesses suffering there? As far as I know, the auto repair business, the dry cleaner, they're still operating properly and they have had no issues. So if there are no issues, health related to the proper operation of sewers, there is no reason to go forward with this. This is it. If we're the only thing that we can possibly point to is that there might be increased property values. With all due respect, that's not our job. It's not our job to improve somebody's property value whilst at the same time putting a tax burden on the rest of the residents. Thanks.
Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. See, I really hate to say so much all the time, I really do, but it's just, these things keep popping up. First off, I feel bad for Elizabeth Ann Seton, I really do. But, you know what, got a lot of land. If you really want to expand, find a place for a septic tank, because that's the only alternative. So you have an alternative. You can either expand and find a place to put the septic system. You can come to the town and see if we can get you on a pump system. If that doesn't work, go to Plan B, put in a septic. You got to do what you got to do, right? I mean, I'm all for more parishioners coming. There are no issues. With our new colleague, Mr. Amianda, I would venture to tell you that any of us in the Bud Lake sanitary sewer system who were sold that sanitary sewer system hookup on the basis of it's only to increase your property value and had nothing to do with the health issues or the environmental impact that it was having on Bud Lake, believe me, they were trying to sell you something that you didn't need. No one in their right mind extends a sewer system except to increase residential or commercial development. That is why they have designated areas where sanitary sewer lines can go. Where sewer and water go, business goes. And most townships have fought against having sanitary sewer lines extended. They're not coming to us because they want their property values increased. That's not their basis for being here. They've come to us saying that there's a health concern, that it's unsightly, they won't be able to have mounded systems put onto their properties. The cesspools that a few of them have will have to be changed to septic systems, which, while unsightly, will work. No documented evidence, Daniel, or anybody here, has ever been presented to this council through anybody that there are failing systems. And I would challenge I want to see the first septic sludge hauler who pulls sludge out of anybody's septic tank and doesn't get a permit first in violation of our township ordinance and code, and doesn't report that. When we find out, not only will he be fined, but the DEP will yank his license. So when somebody tells me, well, they're getting it pumped out, but they're not telling anybody, I'm not buying that. Because if I owned a septic pumping system and you called me up and said, hey, Ray, come pump my system, I'm gonna say, okay, I gotta run to the health department, I'll get the permit, I'll be down there tomorrow. And I'm coming down, I'm gonna do it the right way. I don't think there's that many unscrupulous guys, because they have to take the sludge someplace. And when you go to Parsippany with that sludge, you better have an inspection report from the township and the property where you took that sludge from. The state's not like it was 20 years ago, where you could just come and dump stuff wherever you felt like it, which is why the environment is in the shape that it's in right now, and all of us are afraid to breathe and drink. This is an issue where we have properties. It would be great to see the sewer down there. Unfortunately, it's a financial issue, strictly a financial issue. Has nothing more to do. If the burden was placed strictly on the residents in that section of the town, and the law permitted you and you only to pay for that sanitary sewer system, you'd have my vote and you could walk out the door tonight and I'd make sure it was in there. But as it sits, that is not the law. The law says we all and you all will pay your fair share portion for the benefit of a few. That is, it's just not happening. Not for me, maybe the rest of you guys, but it's not happening for me.
Mr. Labange?
I just wanna
And then we're
clarify-
gonna end it, I'm
yeah.
gonna open it to the
I
public.
just want to clarify to Mr. Perkins, what the residents were saying is they're not going to the town complaining about their systems. They're emptying them. I'm sure they're getting their proper permits, but they're not complaining about their systems because they don't want to have it. Like, already you're saying from the health department, it seems like the systems are getting emptied out more frequently than they should. Obviously, that's a clear sign that something's going on, that the system is not operating properly. If you have people who are pulling permits to have their systems emptied every year or every other year when the state recommendation is 3 years. Also with the DEP, with the whole Highlands preservation, was about water preservation. You have Drake Brook that empties directly into the south branch of the Raritan. That's one of the reasons why they put in the Highlands preservation, was to protect the waterways. And when you have a small area there where there's a lot of systems that they're having to, go through kind of extreme measures to a degree, emptying the tanks every year, obviously these systems are not operating properly. I mean, I know systems where there's people, they have 5 kids and 2 adults and visiting relatives and their kids are over all the time, and they only empty their systems once every 3 years. So if people have to empty it more often, obviously there's something wrong with those systems.
Last thing, Mr. President, I will counter that. It's only the 3 properties that have the illegal uses that are pumping every single year, not the others.
Yeah, but the other ones are emptying frequently.
Not by the records from the health department.
Well, then maybe they're better talk to their people who are emptying out their tanks.
Nope, 2012, 2011, 2012. It's unfortunate those 3 properties, lots number 29, 30, and 31, lot 5800, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2012, and then last June 2013. June 21st, 2013.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins.
Thank you.
I'd like to now open it to the public. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to be heard? Please come up to the mic, state your name and address for the record. Speak into the mic so we can hear.
Hi, I'm Sam Buckley. The address is 10 Highland Avenue in Long Valley.
I can't hear you. Gotta lift that, there you go.
All right. Better?
Yes.
Sam Buckley, 10 Highland Avenue, Long Valley. I grew up in Flanders. Actually, Phyllis Shelton's my mom, so I'm here to talk a little about some of the things that we've heard tonight. There are 2 different issues, Mr. Perkins. They're kind of blended together, obviously, in your mind, but I think there's 2 different issues. One is the non-conformance of a couple of the lots, or the units, that's being addressed. So that's being addressed through an attorney that we've hired that's going to try to bring things into conformance, obviously. Nobody wants to be illegal. And again, that is a bifurcated issue as far as I would like to be concerned for tonight anyway. The pumping that you keep talking about of those units, and you articulated every single year that they get pumped, in the 50-plus years that we've been in Flanders improving properties, it's just been an annual thing that's always been done, whether it's in the mill or the properties across the street that have been lovingly renovated. It's just an annual thing that I know the pumping people are legal, and they keep saying, why are you doing this every year? It's probably overkill, but that's just the way that it's always been. And they're not being pumped because they're failing. They're not being pumped because they're overused, to the best of my knowledge. But I'd just like to address and make some comments about sewerage in Old Flanders. It's a 200-plus-year-old historic section of Mount Olive. There's not a lot of history left in Mount Olive. If you look at the old part of town, everything around it has been sewered. The new developments were sewered down the road. The commercial properties have been sewered all up and down Route 206 to the point of maximum capacity of the sewer plant, but I believe there is still some capacity for what we're talking about here. I know you keep talking about Park Avenue, but I thought that some of Main Street would also be sewered. I'm not an expert. I don't know that much about systems, other than in many towns like Chester, they require 2 of them now because eventually they do fail. You have to have room to put in 2 of them. And the fact is that the folks that have been living in town for a long, long time, like my family, well over 50 years, before Route 80 was even put in or finished, it's tough to see utilities get foisted on you like water. You didn't necessarily choose. You'd still have wells, I guess, but water wasn't a choice. And now that the places are getting older, and I think Ms. LaBeau is correct in saying that a lot of people are kind of just sweeping the issues of their old septics or old just pits and so-called septic areas under the rug. Very, very small lots, very old houses, and I think that there is an overall concern for health and safety there. Are they failing left and right? Is there a high water table? No, there's really not a high water table. We've had a couple of periodic floods, unfortunately, in the history. It's just that the new systems that would have to be put in, if any of these places are sold, are these big mounded systems. What is Old Flanders going to look like when everybody has to put in those systems? What kind of people want that in New York? What does the town want for the oldest section of the township? What's the goal for that? When we look around at Bud Lake, certainly there was a health issue there. Those were summer homes that people started living in year-round. You had to have a septic system, I mean the sewer system. That was crazy. Those places were never meant to be lived in 24 months a year, but they were. Maybe that's what should have been stopped. I don't know. But now those areas are sewered, and Old Flanders is paying for that too. Chester Borough is sewered. It's because of the density in the borough. The outer parts of Chester Township aren't sewered. There's plenty of room for septic systems. Lake Apacon, same things. Any of the small lots, sewered. Mendham Borough, sewered. The township, no. Washington Township, sewered where it needs to be in the old sections of town. Roxbury, on and on. Nobody's trying to burden anybody, and nobody's trying to get anything over on anybody else or cause somebody hardship. Like Ms. LaBeau said, if you don't have kids in town, you're still paying $9,000 or $10,000 a year probably per kid of your taxes to the school system. Are we here to argue too that somebody with special needs, a special needs child, is a burden to the rest of the township because we all have to pay for that child? I don't think so. So just on behalf of somebody that grew up here, spent their entire life here, worked their brains out to keep places nice, painted, clean, and improved and historic, I know that an awful lot's gone into it. There is definitely some misunderstandings with these 3 illegal units that will be addressed. Trust me, I'm involved in that. And I would just like the council to continue to consider what's right here. And I think what's right here is to sewer the oldest section of town before, frankly, it's too late. And I appreciate all of your time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. As you all know by now, I'm Elizabeth Bancroft Hoke, and I live at 75 Main Street, and I also work at the law offices of Matthew C. Johnston at 19 Park Place. So I have, two different reasons for standing here tonight. I'd like to say that I completely agree with everything that Mr. Buckley just said. I have become aware of some of the issues. I don't think that it is fair for this council to not count Phyllis's units, because there is a separate issue that is being taken up outside of this council with the land use board and will be resolved in due time, to say, well, there were so many units, but we shouldn't count 3 or 4 of them because they're allegedly illegally being used, is completely unfair.
I'll sit here and correct you. Those units were never removed. The lot on that block is included. The mere fact that it may have more than one dwelling unit on it is you are correct. That is a separate issue. But for a matter of the count, for the vote, each one of those lots, regardless of the number of dwelling units on it, was entitled to a single vote. So she never lost a vote.
Well, but you're presented tonight that she shouldn't be taken into consideration because there has been this issue raised.
No,
So-
that had to do with the overabundance of influx into the septic tanks.
Well, Mr. Perkins, you and I could argue back and forth all night
No,
as
we
to
can't. No.
what perhaps the interpretation was of how you came across. From where I was sitting, you came across very clearly against all of this and saying that we shouldn't take Phyllis into consideration because of these alleged legal activities. So if you didn't mean that, then I stand corrected. If you did mean that, then I think that's crap, because she's a taxpayer and she should be taken into consideration. We have a beautiful historic district that Sam has elaborated on and Colleen has elaborated on. And to put turkey mounds there when eventually the septics fail will ruin what the historic district looks like. And you can't get that back. Whether or not there's currently some sort of DEP issue, you got cesspools running into the Drake, is that what it's called? Into Drake Stream, River, whatever it is, and you've got septic systems. At some point in time, maybe not today, but at some point in time, these systems are going to fail, and they're going to create some sort of an environmental problem. Right now, we're being we have an opportunity to take advantage of the building that's taking place down across the golf course to use whatever the increase is in the, sorry, I had kids and I stopped learning how to speak.
Sewer allocations.
The sewer allocation. What happens 15 years from now, God forbid, we have an environmental problem and we don't have that sewer capacity? What is it going to cost the town at that point in time? I couldn't remember off the top of my head, and I asked Sean, and he couldn't completely remember what we thought the total cost of this project was going to be. Does anybody remember?
I answered, Amy, about $1 million.
About $1 million? Okay, so this project's going to cost the town $1 million. The town has 6,000 residential units, thereabouts, that are being taxed. If you do the breakdown, that is $166 per house. If you divide that by 12 months, that pay for your part of this is divided over one single year, that is an increase of $13.88 to each household for 1 year to pay off their portion of those of us on Park Place and on Main Street to have this benefit. If you take that $13.88 and spread it out over the course of a low-interest loan, that is 69 cents per month for each household for those of us who don't have sewer right now to have that benefit. So the values of our houses would increase. It's not a significant, terrible drain on the community. you're also helping the couple thousands of people who, maybe 1,600 to 2,000 people who attend St. Elizabeth's. And that's a really big benefit to our community. And we don't want to see the church have to pay significant monies or to have to look elsewhere in order for them to have a parish house so that they can have all of the benefits that they would like to have to offer to the community, not to 20 houses, to the community. So if you look at this, and honestly, my numbers could be totally wrong, but if you look at this, and I don't think they are, this is not such a burdensome increase to the tax implications of everybody's house. Sam said it, I'll say it, I know it's going to be said again. We pay for children to be in school even when we don't have children, because the theory is that they will be better residents. They will be better members of the community. This isn't just about 20 houses. This is about two church communities as well. And by the time my kid goes to school, my husband will have paid, he'll have been there for 20 years of taxes with no kids in the school. That's a whole lot more than 69 cents per month over 20 years. So I hope that you could step back and look at those numbers for a minute before you jump and say that you can't make the rest of the town pay for a subsidy of 20 houses. And that's not even taking into consideration what you pull back that each of the houses would have to pay individually for the increase of the assessed value of their house. This isn't a huge tax financial obligation to the community as it's being kind of thought of prior to throwing out some numbers. And I don't know if anybody thought of what's it going to cost per person? Well, it looks like it's going to cost per household, not even counting the businesses, less than $1 a month. That's not a lot for those of us who live in the historic area.
Well, that's
Joe.
okay, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
No, one of the other concerns I have are the residents that don't want it, that are going to be forced to be on the system and have to pay those additional fees on top of the assessed fee for the whole town. And I don't know if that's a fair value when we're talking about, again, I'm looking at the numbers here of 14 homes that said yes. Again, I don't have the breakdown here of all the other areas of Main Street, Patriots Way that said no.
But what about the difference of, like, what if people had said, yeah, I don't want water? Nobody broke it out and said, well, these houses don't want water, so they're not getting water. There are times where you have to there are times where, frankly, you have to suck it up. And the houses are going to increase in value. Ms. LeBeau has said it, and I work in real estate, and Phyllis works in real estate, and we all know it. You have a septic these days, the number of people who are going to look to purchase your house is significantly reduced. Maybe your house ends up then going into foreclosure or whatever, who knows? But it kind of comes back to the whole kids in school thing. Like, I can't say I'm not going to pay for children to be in the school because I'm not benefiting from that directly. I can't say I don't want to do it. I do it. That's a lot of money each year, but you do it because it's for the community. So when you stop looking at this as 20 houses, 14 houses, look at the church and all of the people who come into the community for the churches. And look at those houses in the historical area. And I can't begin to say enough of, we're really lucky to have this cool, funky little street with a peacock named Snoopy that people talk about. Oh, you live in Flanders. Do you live near the peacock? If we have to change what that street is going to look like because Phyllis has to put in Turkey Mound septics, well, you're really taking away from what this community is all about. And, it's hard. It's hard to know that there are people who live near me who are not going to be happy with this. That is hard, and it's awkward, and you run into them in the grocery store and you're kind of like, hey, but we're a community and we constantly pay taxes for things that we don't necessarily directly benefit for.
Well, let me just step in because you're really going on here. I've yet to find a community that that said, I'm going to buy a house in that community because their historic downtown has sewers on them instead of mounted septic systems. Their school is really crap, and my child's probably not going to get the best education, but you know, their downtown historic district has a sewer in it.
Well, I
So
think that's a
that-
very.
So I'm going,
Give
I'm
it a
going
chance
to,
to
so I'm
talk,
going
please.
to, I'm going to go there. Your analogy is way off. When you pay for schools through your taxes, my son's out of school. A school, when people look, and there's commercials that are on there, even for Xylo or the rest of them, where they go on and say, oh, but did you see the rating on the school? Oop, oh, yes. No one says, oh, did you see they have sewer systems down in their historic system? No. So what you're asking me to do is to help subsidize the people who bought those houses, and you want me to make their property worth more. That's really what you want me to do. And you want all the taxpayers of Mount Olive to make those properties worth more money because they have a sewer system in it versus ugly turkey mounds that may have to be put in. That's really what you're asking me to do
I'm asking you to.
as a community.
I'm asking. Oh, I should probably stop because you clearly have absolutely no interest in listening to anything other than what's in your narrow little mind about how this should work.
That's
I believe
exact-
that's totally unfair.
And I think that's
we're here to
exactly what I'm
listen,
getting from you.
And that's why I opened it to the public. Totally unfair.
Well, less than $1 per household per month if it's over 20 years. Think of it that way.
Still money out of the other taxpayers that don't want it that I'm not going to commit to.
Well, hopefully the rest of you have actually taken some time to listen to what I've had to say and what Sam has had to say and what the other people here have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Yes, ma'am. Please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Hi, I'm Dr. Anne Marie Petrock. I live at 83 Main Street. So I represent that contingent that actually has the land, has a 5 or 6 year old septic system. And so I wouldn't have to worry about the beautification of my property because it's not actually going to impact that. I'm also a first-time homeowner, and this is the first time that I'm speaking to the council, so please bear with me. I will try to be as concise as possible, but PhDs, we tend to ramble. So I guess something that I'm struggling with, trying to understand, is we seem to be hung up on the health issue. And so, again, as a new homeowner in the township, I pay a pretty hefty tax bill. Now, when I said that I was going to move to Mount Olive, you're right, absolutely. That's a great school system, it's a great place to raise a family. I don't have that stuff. I'm happy to pay the taxes, though, because I recognize the benefit that it brings to the community. Education across the board, kids in great schools, they're educated and they can go on and do great things. Hopefully come back and contribute to the corporations that have their headquarters here. I don't really question too much why we have so many headquarters and why our tax rate is still so high. Because I figure, you know what? I'm part of the community. I'm paying in. So I guess what concerns me is hearing that the township won't take action on something unless it's only a matter of public health. I guess I'm concerned because saleability is something that's a real thing. And although it may not directly impact my property value, because quite frankly, again, I have a functional septic system that will be there 30 plus years from now, hopefully, God willing, if we don't get sewers in here. However, the problem that I've seen is I actually know people who have tried selling properties in Mount Olive, and because they have septic systems that are 20 or so years old, they're failing their inspections. Even though their systems may not be in danger of imminent failure, they're failing because they're aged septic systems. And I don't know if the folks who are objecting to having septic systems removed and putting in sewer are aware that this type of thing is actually happening because they haven't tried to sell their homes yet. So that's something as a person who's looking toward equity in my home and looking toward kind of my future and where I'm going to go and what I'm going to do, that's a real concern. Again, taxes for schools, I have no problem paying into it because it's for the betterment of the community. And I guess what concerns me is hearing back from my town council, who I look to for guidance because I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I'm new to this. Hearing you say that you don't really care about what it means and what kind of impacts there are for homeowners concerns me. And, maybe that's something I just need to get over. It's possible, and that's something I'll figure out. I guess I'm concerned also that when people talk about, yes, there's nothing failed just yet, I'm concerned, does the township actually have contingency plans for, in the event that something does fail, do they help out the individual homeowners with EPA issues and that type of thing? I'm unaware of that.
The reason that you address health is if you have health concern because you have mass failings, it would be much easier for my business administrator, my engineer, and my health officer to go down to DEP and say, we have mass failings of septic systems throughout the entire Old Flanders area.
Right.
None of these systems are working, they are backing up, it is a health issue. The state would pour money, so would the federal government, we'd have sewers very quickly.
Okay.
If you don't, they frown upon coming down and saying, I'm doing this because I want property values to increase.
Were there any problems when the power went out? When we had no power for several weeks during Sandy?
I had problems, yeah, I couldn't,
You had no water, no sewer,
I'm
no
on a
nothing?
well and I have a grinder pump, so went to the bathroom at the senior center and washed up
But I
in the
mean, I
men's
guess
room.
those are the public health things that I think about too, is long-term, how do those type of things occurring, how do we have planning in place for those types of things?
The DEP and the state, there are contingency plans when there's individual, same with water. If you have a well that is so contaminated that conventional treatment devices are just not going to be acceptable,
Right.
then the DEP will help fund money to be able to extend a potable water line to get to that residence. The same with sanitary sewer. If there is just no way that things can be done. Unfortunately, over the years, we just don't have any empirical data that says, I have mass failings down here. And we started with the entire Old Flanders area. If you remember, the survey was sent out to like a lot of people.
Right, yeah.
It came back that the majority of those people said no. They did not want it. What happened subsequent to that was that a committee was formed, and based upon what the committee wanted, the area was kind of shrunken down. That said, we're just going to do Park Place, and we're going to come up the road, we're going to go past Mother Elizabeth Ann Seton, and we're going to tie into the back of Flanders Crossing.
Right.
And the people on Patriots Pass said, oh, well, we don't need to have to tie into it. Unfortunately, they're going to have to, because once the sewer line goes past, we have to connect them, and they're going to have to come in. None of them want this.
I remember that discussion.
So when we look at it, there are contingencies if there's mass failing. I have places, Flanders Netcong Road, and Flanders Drakestown Road. There's a water line that's run past there from the new Morris Chase development, as well as their sewage from their packaged sewage plant. But every of those residents that cannot hook in because the allocation for that plant does not include them. So people, including now freeholder David Scapicchio, who was our mayor and a council member here, would love not to have a septic system on his. So if I run a sewer system down for Old Flanders, why don't I run one all the way down Flanders Drakestown Road and tie it into the back of the ITC?
What's the percentage of people in Mount Olive that are still on septic, or other than sewer systems?
Percentile? I don't have that number right off the bat. I can tell you there's still a pretty good amount of people.
The majority.
Well, the majority of, especially in the newer developments, a lot of them still had dry sewer because there was just no place to run the sewer lines. They put them in dry, same with the water.
Right, Patriots Path has that, as I recall.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just concerned, as a homeowner, that feeling like I'm contributing to the community and feeling like we're not necessarily being heard. And it just seems, and I could be off base, and I apologize, I'm not trying to speak for everybody else. I think I understand what you're saying in terms of mass failure. And I guess I wonder if there have been any other situations where, other than mass failure and mass health implications, other things have been done.
To my knowledge, in the 28 years I've been in this town, no. Other than the Bud Lake sanitary sewer system, where we knew we had tremendous septic failures all throughout Bud Lake, as well as contamination of the lake itself. And of
Okay.
course, part of the problem was that interbasin transfer that you may have heard over the years, where the water now was no longer being recharged into the one aquifer because of now having sewers. A lot of the shallow point wells, especially along the lake, started going dry. So people had to have new wells dug. You know, so,
Okay.
I mean, there's groundwater recharge. If there was, believe me, if there was a way that this could be done, that it didn't impact the entire township. Is it a nice section of town? Yes, I like it. I drive through it maybe twice a year. It's pretty, but the people bought those homes. They bought them with what's there. And if the laws change,
Right.
then do you ask now, because the law changed, and you say, I find myself with a piece of property that the law has changed, and it's really not to my benefit anymore, the way this law has changed, help me.
But I
Do
mean, I
we-
think this
do-
has been requested before, hasn't it?
Excuse me? what?
To get sewer in this area, has this not been a
In
request in the past?
2008, it was.
It was
and-
only after that law was passed?
No. 2008 was when the first time this was brought up, and it was shot down by council. It was shot down last year, and now we subsequently find ourselves here a third time discussing this issue.
Right.
In 2008, most people shut it down.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't want it.
Too much
Most
money.
people being town residents in the area, or?
From that area.
From that area.
From that area?
They voted it down.
Now,
was
I
it
also,
6
right
to
after
1,
that,
if I recall?
that survey went out, back several months ago when that went out, I also received some mail.
Listen, it's gonna be hard for the record to pick up, so please be acknowledged before you speak.
Okay, sorry. I received mail from other residents in the Main Street area that said they were not aware of what all of the implications were in terms of what the tax burden really would be and what the assessments really would be when they sent in their survey results. And so the letters, and I wish that I had brought them and I didn't, but the letters indicated that they would change their vote if they had known then, before this survey, what they knew then. So,
What I can tell you, and I'm only going, and it's not necessarily hearsay, but words that I've heard from other residents, that, as I said at my opening statement to this, there were people that came in and said, oh my gosh, I didn't understand, I really didn't know, can you tell me exactly what it's gonna cost? And the best we could tell them was that, based upon our professional engineer's estimate,
I remember.
Right?
I'm not
Yeah.
criticizing
No, no.
that at all. All I'm saying is I don't know how accurate that original survey is if folks are still saying the same thing.
Mr. Canning?
I will defend my piece of work on that one. Prior to April 13th of 2013, when that survey was due back to the township, we had several informational sessions in this room, one of which was February 2013, long before that survey was due. We had the tax assessor, I believe we had the bond counsel, we had the engineer, we had all our professionals here, including, I think, some from Morris County wastewater management. So we brought in all the professionals. Anybody that says they were not informed prior to returning the survey, either was not paying attention or didn't attend that session. Just defending my own work and my own turf. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Canning. Mrs. Laybow?
One of the things that keeps coming up, and I'd be interested to find out why it was done, many years ago when the township decided to put in public water in Old Flanders, there was no survey. They decided that they needed to, everybody had wells. They had no problem with their wells. All of a sudden, public water was run through there. And there was no like I said, there was no survey. I don't know that there was a public health issue for whatever reason at that time. And I don't know, Lisa, do you remember by any chance when that was? It was several,
Back in the 70s.
in the 70s, they just decided to put the public water in. Now, of course, I'm just totally guessing. I've never done a study before Mr. Perkins starts saying, did you study that or did you get facts on that? I would imagine if there was wells right now with all of the septics and the cesspools there would be an issue with the water. And yes, we do have a state well water act right now, and I do have properties that I've sold that fail, and they have to put in a system, and it's generally about $2,000 to put in the UV lights and the different systems to treat the water. And it's nothing like a $25,000 or $30,000 or $35,000 septic system. It's a whole, you're just comparing, Ray, before you compared it was apples to oranges. It's not the same thing. And I think what this young lady here is saying is really, I really like what you're saying. It's for your community. It's an improvement to the community. And a big part of that community are the two churches that are there. They have said time and time again, just forget about if there wasn't 20 residents with, I think there's 5 businesses there. just for the churches alone, that's part of our community. This is an improvement to our community. Does it increase the value of each house individually? I don't know. Is somebody going to say, oh, I'm only going to buy Mount Olive because they have this really delightful old Flanders section? No, but they're going to, if they go to St. E's and they want to know, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you expand here? Well, we can't because we needed sewers, but the town wouldn't give us sewers. We're talking about putting in sewers that impacts our community, that improves a section of our community, which overall it's a revenue stream. It does improve the value, the living. I mean, all these nice things that we like to do. Turkey Brook Park. I know some people who didn't even know we had a park in town.
I'd like to give
I'm
her
sorry.
the opportunity
I'm
to
sorry.
finish.
Go ahead.
It was open to the public, and
I think I've gotten the information I was looking for, and I think I've said my piece, so thank you.
Thank you.
anyone else from the public? Yes, sir. Please come up, state your name and address for the record.
How you doing? My name's Dominic Lagora. I've been in Mount Olive probably 40 years, and I just have a couple problems with the town. We have a Lakeview Estates over there they just put over there on Johnson Avenue. And down at the bottom of Johnson Ave, when you come up, they got this house over there, and they had it there for quite a long time. And I have talked to the mayor probably like 5 years now, maybe 4 or 5. And they keep giving me, sounds like, just telling me what they want to tell me to keep me quiet. But that house is about ready to fall down. It has a lot of kids in it from the school every night. Well, not every night, but a lot. They go in there, they smoke and that. And we had a problem there not too long ago where they had to board it up because the kids were getting a ladder going up and, you know. And this winter, the roof started collapsing in now. So now they're starting to go through that a little bit. And I would appreciate if somebody would, I heard a lawyer owns that. I'm not sure now. That's what I was told about 3 years ago. And I wish that somebody would have, whoever owns it, tear it down. You know, it's an eyesore for the town. It looks terrible, and I wish somebody would do something about it.
Well, Mr. Canning's writing that down, and
I'm already on it.
address it.
It's not related to sewage. It's a gentleman by the name of Mr. Grabowski who was holding off until the Highlands Redevelopment Act went through to preserve the impervious coverage so we can rebuild there eventually and get some more tax ratables into the township. And I think I've spoken to you before. If you knock it down now without getting the Highlands approval on it, you lose that right to rebuild on there forever. I spoke to this actually to Catherine Nataflusi about this last week. At this point, we've approved the budget. We have money in our budget to knock down these structures. If he does not comply, probably within 30 days, we're going to move unilaterally. So, but we've been waiting for the Highlands redevelopment. I know it's been a long, slow process. We have that now. So now that building can come down, and he does not lose his right to rebuild there.
Okay, I just
So that's what
didn't
we were
know
waiting for.
because I knew they were going to sometime, but it never seems to happen.
Yeah, unfortunately, we were waiting for the Highlands Council to approve
And
that.
also, I think that you told me they were going to knock the one down there across from A&P, which they did.
That's done, yes.
But, see the mess they made up there? It looks like a landfill dump.
Yeah, but-
When they got all done, they didn't cover it in.
Drop some.
Don't they have like an inspector, like if somebody does something like that they come inspect it?
There's no
And-
gaping holes. Right now, it's unsightly, but there's current plans before the planning
Yeah,
board to rebuild it. But
Okay.
the big thing is that structure's down. That's one of 6 that I have on my hit list.
Yeah, I just go by there all the time when I go shopping, I see it, and, you know,
We'll
They-
make a note of that and see if we can.
they
clean the
need
problem.
some like landfill or just something to cover it up in that, because it's terrible up there. But they are gonna take care of that problem over there in Johnson?
Yeah, I'm hoping within 30 days, another letter's going out to, like I said, the property owner. We've been in touch with them right straight
Okay,
along. And
that's
we're just
all.
trying to preserve that right to build on that property, because eventually you don't want a vacant property that's never going to be able to contribute back to the township. So that's what
Right.
we're waiting for.
Because like, you know, you like to see everything look nice, you know, and that's been there, I don't know whoever owned it, but it's been there for years.
And this year in the budget, council did include a line item to if they don't want to act, then we'll act for them. So for the first
Yeah.
time since.
So
I've
you're
been here,
saying the
we can
town
move.
has to knock it down now?
If we-
Doesn't the lawyer own it?
If we have to, we're prepared to. We'll put a lien on the property. So for the first
Oh,
time, we
okay.
have the ability to actually
Yeah.
act if he doesn't want to help us.
Because I always
We'll
thought
get there.
maybe, just pressure the guy, find him if he doesn't knock it down or whatever, but,
Yeah, no.
you guys know what you're doing, so, okay, I didn't
We're on
know.
it. You'll see improvement sooner rather than later. I
But
don't
I
know
came
the
up-
timeframe, but you'll
By
see
the
it soon.
summer.
Yeah, I come up today and nobody was there, so I just wanted to, that's why I'm here tonight, so,
Stop in. I'm usually in. Just stop in and call me in.
thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Just for the record, anyone comes up to speak, this discussion is for the Park Place sewers. I will open it to the public later on any other items. Mr. Batch?
Good evening. John Batch, 15 Sherman Place, Flanders, and I'm here with respect to St. Elizabeth's. I just had a couple of questions and a couple of clarifications. My understanding that within the budget there was to be $130-some thousand for an engineering study
Design.
to prepare applications for state grants. Is that still part of what we're discussing tonight, or is it the entire SOAR project?
I can speak to that if you want, if Sherry wants to chime in. Currently, as I said at the beginning, the council has before it in the 2014 budget, the project is listed within the 2014 budget up to a cost of $250,000. Now, currently, you're not incurring any costs on that until you go out to bond on that, and we raise the 5%, correct? For that bond anticipation note. That would be for the full engineered design, as Councilman Perkins just alleged or stated. And then subsequent to that, you'd have to put the letter to NJEIT for the low cost or the low interest loan they'd be getting from the state if they funded it. Prior to you get to that point, though, this council would have to prospectively go forward with that cost, get the design, and then approach the state. And then the state funds or they don't fund. And then that's the next way station or waypoint for council if you decide to go that route.
Yeah, based on that, my understanding was that there was potential for state grants, not just low-interest loans, to subsidize some of the cost of the SOAR project. There's actually, I think, 3 churches involved. There's St. Elizabeth's, there's the Methodist Church, and there's also the Baptist Church on Main Street. And it is a community-related situation. St. Elizabeth's has about 1,680 families associated with it. And our intent was to build a community center to be able to serve those 1,680 families. My understanding was also that Patriots Way, there's a dry system in there already that's just not connected. So, they do have a system there. It's just not operational because I believe they all have septics as well. And again, this last survey that went out was for more than just Park Place. There might have only been 16 or 20 properties affected, but Main Street would also be affected. So my understanding was that it wasn't overwhelmingly said no people wanted it. Park Place wanted it, Main Street didn't. But in clarification, I think later on, many people on Main Street did want it. So it was just for our intent to make sure we understand what's going on. And, if St. Elizabeth's cannot, or if the SOAR project does not go through, and St. Elizabeth's wants to build a community center, then they would have to install a septic system, and if the township could assist in any way, shape, or form for the approval process, it would be appreciated. Thank you very much.
John?
Yes, right.
Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, John, just to be clear, not sure that, I did talk to NJEIT today, New Jersey Environmental Infrastructure Trust Funds. Those are all low-interest loans. There's no grants.
Okay.
That come from it. Most of it now goes to Sandy relief. And as I said during my statement, we're hard-pressed to blame any of this on Sandy. The applications, the letter of intent, would have to be filed with NJEIT by October. They've actually extended the
Yes.
deadline for the filing on that. Now, EDA may or may not have funding there. Typically, they don't get too involved with water and wastewater treatment. The wastewater trust fund, again, that's low-interest loans. They don't really have any grants. The crux of it is, do we go forward now with the full engineering design? That's what was placed into the budget. It's up to this council to decide whether we go forward with that. If the council this evening decides no, then the rest of the point is moot, and then St. Elizabeth needs to look at a septic system when they decide to finally get the plans finished up. I assume Joe DiMaria has been working on the architecturals, and you
Correct.
guys have everything done. I mean, it pains me to some degree when I look at places like places of worship that do provide such a tremendous benefit to the residents and comfort, especially in our times of need and stress. But I also, and you know this, because you and I have served on boards together, I have to look at the benefit to the entire township. And when I look at the benefit that the entire township derives from this, they really don't derive a benefit from this. The close people do, the folks that are at your parish, the folks that go into the Methodist church, the Baptist church isn't even on the path. Those folks are going to benefit. But the rest of Mount Olive Township is only going to be burdened with paying a tax. And I'm a Republican. The people that are Republican hopefully voted for me because I'm a Republican and I'm a conservative. And I don't want to sound cliche-ish. I don't subscribe to the Obama or the Democratic version of let's have other people pay for the benefit of a few. I don't have that. I bought a piece of property, you know what? It flooded. I had to leave the property. I had to pay to have it pumped. I had to pay to replace all of the equipment inside. I bought the property. Now, by the virtue of my wife, who will swear that, I always tell her this, for the lousy 10 feet more of elevation, I'd have been safe. But for the 28 years, every single year, I've had water at least in my basement. The floods were 3 times 2 years ago, where we had to evacuate the house and completely live out. So when people buy homes 15 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and these are not all people like, you know, Mrs. Shelton, who's been there for a long time. Some of these people have been there not so long. They bought the house with the condition that's there. If the septic system needs to be replaced, and, you know, typically, John, if you're pumping your system, you're taking care of it, you're not overloading it, you're not dumping grease and other garbage down there like you shouldn't, your septic systems will last for a long time. Your leach field may get a little sloppy, you may need to have that perked out, but typically they run for a good length of time. If it has to be replaced, it has to be replaced. If the sewer line in your house has to be replaced, your furnace has to be replaced. Do every time people's furnaces go bad, do you have to come to the township and have us replace the furnaces? I mean, that may be a little far off. I can't in my heart look in and say, because a facility wants to put in something to the benefit of their constituents or their residents or their parishioners, and it will be a benefit to a tremendous amount of people, I can't let that be the crux that turns to me and says, you should make everybody else subsidize that. I just can't do that.
Oh, I understand that, but the analysis that was done seemed to be pretty insignificant as far as being a burden on the rest of the community. So,
But again, when you all I'm going to say is, I'll go back to the Obama. If it's fine with everybody else, and they're all up here, if they think that everybody else should help fund those properties down there and hopefully increase their property values, then the votes are going to be here, and that's what's going to happen. I will be still a no vote. I still will support that parish. I will do everything in my power to help support them, but I'm not going to be a Democrat and subsidize improvements at the cost of everybody else. I'm not going to do that.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Mr. DeCastro?
Mr. Canning, I just want to clear up the one thing I think I asked already, but I want to clear up. The $130,000 for the study or thereabouts, if we approve that, are we committing to the project? Because if it goes to the grant, I thought I understood, once it's submitted, if they approve that, then we have to move forward with the project, or do we not?
If you do the design, and the costs are, I'll break them down, the surveying is about $15,000, geotech surveying another $12,000, permitting $8,500, NJEIT application is $20,000, and then the preliminary and final design is $80,000. Those are your engineering costs up to NJEIT approval, and then it becomes construction oversight, and that would become a part of your NJEIT grant. The NJEIT, once you apply and send that letter of intent, the assumption is you're going through with this project. I am not aware of the mechanism to say, no, thank you, or to back out, and I'm not sure if it exists or it doesn't exist. That's something I'd have to.
So it is, if we commit to that, doing this far, the 130, we're committing to the project,
That's-
technically.
Yeah, that's up to this
Can't get
council.
out.
Again, I take direction at council.
No, but I meant there's no way out of
Do
it.
the design, I would assume you would
You would want to
logically
go
go ahead
forward,
with the.
okay. Well, yeah, no, I'm
with
trying
the,
to find.
You don't want to pay an engineer to do it, to design something if you're not going to do it.
Yeah, I get it now.
Anyone else from the public? If,
Call the question.
you're not going to be repetitive, are you? No. Okay. If you have something new to add, fine.
Mr.
The
Meany?
hour's getting late. And we all work.
Mr. Meany?
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, really.
Do I need to restate my name?
Yes, please.
Sam Buckley, 10 Highland Avenue, Long Valley. So again, I appreciate your time and listening to everybody. Just a little backstory here as to, I guess it was 2008 and some other years that the sewer issues first came up in Flanders. What really kind of drove this point home most recently was the approval of a 300-plus unit development that's down by the golf course. I forget the name of it. That my understanding is that they applied for and got approvals to upgrade and improve and expand the existing sewer plant to a point, and that it was like at that point, and no further expansions of that plant were ever to be allowed. So we just kind of saw this as a last-ditch effort to try to sewer the old historic part of town. And of course, there's been negative and positive discussion ever since. So if this gets voted down, our understanding is this is done. It's over. There's no more in the future chance of tying into a sewer plant that's going to be maximized. So this is a fait accompli for most of us. And for Mr. Perkins, just one couple notes that I took was I understand that it's some sort of buyer beware for most people when they buy a house. You bought it, you deal with what happens in the future, especially when they're older houses. Most of the people that I was delivering papers to 40 years ago are still there. Most of the people in the area have been there for many, many decades. There's very few new homeowners there. So I just wanted to make that point. Most folks have been there for a really long time. And I can tell you who paid on time and who didn't for their on my delivery route. And I just wanted to give a personal opinion too, that this goes so far beyond property values. It's not just about, hey, my house is going to be worth so much more and your house is going to be worth so much more. You need to take that into consideration. It does go beyond property values. It's for, maybe it doesn't go as far as health and safety, but I think sewer systems, if they're already surrounding an old part of town, my question is always, why didn't it get sewered to begin with when most of the other sections just downstream from here did get sewered? The newer developments, the ones that frankly I used to hunt on that are now all quarter-acre lots, they've got sewer. We don't. It just kind of ended, and maybe looking back, we should have made a lot more noise then. As far as this budget for 2014, the way that I hear that is you can stop before the application. You don't have to apply. I think you'll understand your costs an awful lot more once you do the engineering studies and maybe go a bit deeper into it. So I don't think that a positive vote to move forward with the engineering study is going to commit you to this entire project. You can stop it. You don't have to apply. So I would submit that of that $130,000, whatever that budget was, stop well before the permitting process. Bring this up once you understand the costs a bit more. I think you do have that opportunity. Thank you very much, again, for your time.
Mr. Meany?
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? If not, I'm going to close it to the public. Mrs. Laybow, you had your hand up.
Yes. I just wanted to, Mr. Buckley brought up the point that I wanted to also make with Mr. Koenig. As I understand it from our committee meetings, that before we can move forward, we need to have an understanding of our costs. In order to find out what our true costs are going to be, we need this engineering study. And after we get that, and Mr. Koenig, correct me if I'm wrong, once we get the study done, then we know what our options are from there. And as I understand it from our meetings,
Colleen, unless council authorizes the study, the expenditure for the study it's a moot point.
I know, but it's already it's in the mayor's budget. We're not being asked to add any money. It's already in the budget for this year. The mayor's already put it in there to do the study.
We'll see what the council's
And,
feelings are.
and then for us to find out where we go from there, we need the study to find out what is the true cost going to be. It might be cost prohibitive. It may be a lot less than we think it's going to be, but we need
I don't think
this
it's gonna be
study.
a lot less.
Well, that's the problem that we're at, is we don't know till we have that study done. That's the problem. And I think we'll have a whole lot more information at this. Was that what we're looking for, Sean?
Yeah, where we're at, it's not a study, it's a plan. The actual
plan.
plan design and the permitting by the engineer, and at that point you submit it. But yeah, it's, you are accurate, once the plan is done,
Final
you
design
would have,
specification.
based upon 2014, 2015 costs and prepared for RFP, you would have the actual, within a certain range, dead-on costs.
And I know that Mayor Greenbaum was in favor of doing this plan, the engineering plan, and that's why he included it in his budget, so that we can find out where we go from there. That's,
Perkins, you had something?
You done? Thank you, Mr. President. Just, I've been here a long time, and I've seen engineering studies done, and we put them on the back burners. Engineering studies and design are strictly that. Included in the engineering design is surveying, geotechnical engineering services, permits, the NJEIT application. Just for him to make the application, get the documentation down, he's got $20,000 in there. The preliminary and final design specifications are $80,000. So if we're going to do a design, you're going to have the specification. And then construction administration is $69,000, so we can forget about that if we don't go into construction. This winter, and throughout most communities in northern New Jersey, took a tremendous toll on the public roadways. There have been numerous accidents. People have been hurt. Our roadways are in terrible shape. My county freeholder, who was my past mayor, saw fit to purchase 2 hot box units and put an expedited force out there to start repaving and repairing the county roadways. Understand from speaking to you, Mr. Mania, today, that there was some woman who actually stepped into a pothole on Flanders-Netcong Road and managed to hurt herself. You know where my $130,000 vote goes for? A piece of road equipment to get out there and repair the terrible, terrible roadways that run throughout this entire township. That's where my vote goes. Thank you, Mr. President.
Anyone else? If not, I guess I need to entertain a motion as to whether we're going to go forward with the expenditure to do the study.
Take a poll.
Take a poll.
Pardon?
Take a poll.
Pardon? Straw poll, yes. Mr. Amian.
Okay, what's the motion
what's the
again?
question, though? Is it,
It's a yes or no.
Question is whether we want to authorize the expenditure to move forward with the engineer's fee.
Yes.
yes?
You said yes, Mr.
Yes.
Amian?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow said
Yes.
yes.
No.
Mr. Perkins?
Yeah.
No?
No.
Mr. Roman?
No.
Mr. Nicastro?
No.
Mr. Mania? No.
Project dies.
So that's the 4-2, wasn't
It's a straw poll.
Yes.
it? Right? 2 yes, 4 no's.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving forward. We have resolutions. Any questions on the resolutions?
Nope.
Any questions on the ordinances? Any old business? Any new business? Anyone from the public wish to be heard? If not, I'll close it to the public and adjourn to the public meeting.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Mr. Roman, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries.
No, we're not.
Okay. Mrs. Lashway, the open public meetings announcement, please.
According to the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given to the Daily Record. Notice has been posted in the Municipal Building, 204 Flinders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, and notices were sent to those requesting the same.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante? Mrs. Lebaugh?
Here.
Mr. Perkins?
Here.
Mr. Roman?
Here.
Mr. Nacastro?
Here.
Mr. Mania?
Yes, here. Okay, next we have on the agenda, public hearing on the 2014 municipal budget. Number one, the adoption of the resolution municipal budget. Pardon? Going to open up this hearing to the public. Anyone from the public? If not, I'll close it to the public. Mr. Amianda?
Okay, Mr. President, I make a motion to adopt 2014 municipal budget.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Lebaugh?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes. Next is the resolution for the sanitation budget. Mr. Perkins, would you do that, please?
Yes, Mr. President, I make a motion that we adopt the resolution relative to the sanitation budget 2014.
Can we just hold until Mrs. Lebaugh comes back so that we have
Sure.
as
Sure.
many votes? Sure. Take a 2-minute break. 'cause I'll
Sure,
have to
take a
listen.
2-minute break.
Make it 5.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Roman made the second. Anyone from the public? Hearing none, close it to the public.
All right, we're taking the vote on resolution number 2, adopting the sanitation budget. Mr.
Correct.
Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Lebaugh?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes. Okay, next is the waiver of reading budget in full. Mrs. Lebaugh?
One second. I'm sorry, I had to actually excuse myself before because drinking a lot more water these days.
For a hearing like this, we should have vodka, I guess.
Oh, resolution, I'm sorry, I'm thinking we're at ordinances. I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 3, waiver of reading budget in full resolution, the
Is
full
there a second?
resolution.
Second.
Mr. Nacastro, second. Anyone from the public wish to be heard? If not, I'll close it to the public. Roll call.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Lebaugh?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes. Next is the approval of minutes of previous meetings. Mr. Perkins?
Yes, Mr. President, I move for adoption and approval of the March 4th, 2014 budget hearing and the March 11th, 2014...
First.
March 1st, 2014 budget hearing, March 11th, 2014 workshop and public meetings.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Lebaugh?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Abstain on March 1st, yes on March 11th. Correspondence, we have. $34 pieces of correspondence. Any discussion? Okay. Next, ordinances for public hearing, none. Ordinance for first reading, second reading, 422. Ordinance number next item on the agenda for first reading is ordinance number 10-2014, entitled, "An Ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Mount Olive Establishing Recreation Fees for Various Township-Sponsored Recreational Activities." Mr. Roman.
Thank you. I move that ordinance number 10-2013 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on April 22nd, 2014 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of law.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Laybow?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes. The next item on the agenda for a first reading is ordinance number 11-2014, bond ordinance providing for various capital improvements in and by the Township of Mount Olive, the County of Morris, New Jersey, appropriating $4,463,600, therefore, and authorized the issuance of $3,956 and 116 bonds or notes of the Township of finance part of the cost thereof. Mr. Nacastro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move ordinance number 11-2014 to be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on April 22nd, 2014 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
Second.
Mr. Perkins, you second it?
Yes, sir.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Laybow?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes. Next item on the agenda for first reading is ordinance number 12-2014, bond ordinance providing for various improvement to the water utility in and by the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris, New Jersey. Mr. Amianda.
Okay. I move the ordinance number 12-2014, providing for various improvements to the water utility in and by the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris.
I'd let him finish reading it because
John did.
Mr. Mania didn't read the whole title into the record, so let Mr. Amianda finish.
Okay, Mr. President. I move the ordinance number 12-2014 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on 4/22/2014 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of a second reading and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish most and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
Second.
Mr. Perkins, second.
We're going to do this one over again. Bond ordinances are very particular in the records that we have to do. When we say we read an ordinance by title, we had
I
to
gotta
read the
read the
whole
whole
title.
thing.
And he didn't finish. So
All
we're
right,
gonna
let me
just do this
go
one
over that again.
Okay.
Next item on the agenda is first reading in the ordinance number 12-2014, bond ordinance providing for various improvements to the water utility in and by the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris, New Jersey, appropriating $650,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $617,500 bonds or notes of the township to finance part of the cost thereof.
Mr. Amianda, if you want to just...
Do it again.
restate
Yeah, do it again. You're going to get good at this now.
I move that the ordinance number 12 2014 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on April 22nd, 2014 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Brickstown Road, Bad Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
Second.
Mr. Perkins, second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes. Next, we're on consent resolutions. Anyone wishing to move any to non-consent? Hearing none. Mr. Roman, would you move that, please?
I move for approval of consent resolutions 4 through 7.
Second.
Mr. Perkins, second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on the consent resolutions? Hearing none, I close it to the public. Council comments on consent resolution, none. Public portion on consent motion, Mrs. Laybell.
I move consent resolutions 4 through 7.
No, we're on consent
We're on
motion.
consent
Motion,
motions.
Bill list, sorry.
Well, there's three.
There's
Three of them.
There's 3 of them. I move consent motions 1 through 3, peddler's permit for Cindy Capivanti, approval of taxi permit for Kamal Benmalak, and the bill list.
Second.
Any discussion?
I didn't hear the second. Was that Mr. Roman?
Second.
Mr.
Mr.
Perkins, second.
Perkins.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Abstain on 1, yes on 2 and 3.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes on 1 and 2, and yes on the bill list, but abstain on check number 64909.
Mr. Mania?
Yes. Administrative reports, Mr. Canning.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple things tonight, more operational in nature. Since April 1st, and just kind of piggybacking on what Councilman Perkins had stated before, we've been getting the hot mix asphalt with our road crews. We've been making permanent repairs to a small portion of what is certainly a Herculean task this spring, but the crews have been hitting ITC South and North, Gold Mine Road, Link Road, Old Ledgewood, Ringenbach, Old Bud Lake Road, Lucas Street, Flanders Netcon, as well as the daily complaints and iWork. So they're on them, and we're hoping we're going to make a lot of headway as spring wears on. Sweeping, we are out doing street sweeping far earlier than we have in past years. Part of that we're able to get a little bit of a jump on due to the streamlining of sanitation. So because of that, we're able to allocate an extra person into street sweepers, which is certainly welcome and something that we'd like to, I know I personally would like to be ahead of come mid to late May as opposed to last year when we were certainly behind as a result of Hurricane Sandy. 2 other items. At the mayor's request, I've started a analysis on the various brine research and the various forms that can take. That's going to take about 3 months. Hopefully I'm going to have a full report for council sometime in June, and the recommendation.
When in your process of looking at the brine system, is there any possibility of maybe reaching out to, say, Chester or some of the other municipalities, and maybe we can go into a joint effort as to a way to minimize costs?
I'm glad you asked that. There's actually part of that's going to be a shared service component. One of the ideas that I floated, and we're doing it in committee, is do we centralize any type of brine system, or do we do it north and south where we can kind of piggyback where either one of our borders or neighboring towns border and have a tank, and we would do a shared service so to speak, and whether that's Long Valley or Chester or Stanhope. And I do know that at least one of those neighboring communities already has brine systems, so that's something we'll look at when we, we'll probably end up presenting to council, anywhere between 3 and 5 packages, whether we do solely alone, centralized, decentralized, shared services. Usually, I think council knows me by now, I try to give you a smorgasbord and, choose the best solution from there.
Is NetCom one of the towns that we're looking to?
I haven't gotten that far yet with the attempts. I do know Stanhope to the north has a brine system. Not sure about Netcong. I'd have to reach out to Ralph. That's right now we're just on the systems, and then I'm going to benchmark other communities, not just New Jersey but also around the nation, find out their experience. Then we'll look into shared services, and then hopefully produce a return on investment for you, if there is any, as well as anecdotal evidence, perception something as well. So the mayor has me working on that, and that's I'm working with Frank Wilper Jr., Sherry, Jim Lynch, and Timmy Quinn on that. And lastly, sanitation ordinance. I know I had stated to this body that we would have that for you this winter. This winter tied us up with a few other things, so that's the ordinance is still being looked at in subcommittee. However, I will say that in the meantime, any complaints and requests we've had for second cans through the winter, we've had our sanitation foreman, which again, thanks to the automation, we've allowed him to be a foreman, which is nice rather than just a glorified driver. So he's been going out on the complaints and the lack of recycling or different various hotspots in town. I can say that 95%, if not higher, of complaints and requests for second cans, he's gone, documented, spoken with the homeowners, done an educational component, given them flyers. 95% of our requests for second cans have resulted in an increase in recycling and a rescission of the request for a second can once they find out that those cardboard boxes and the cans and the bottles that shouldn't be in a solid waste stream and are costing you about $94 per ton, as opposed to into the commingled or the fiber stream where we actually get money on the backside. It becomes a win-win, and usually once that homeowner realizes that, they find the volume of garbage is dropped. So those are the 3 things that I currently have for council.
Mr. Canning, you had mentioned one time that styrofoam can be recycled.
Yeah, in my experience, styrofoam can be recycled. There is one of our recipients, Green Sky out of Carlstadt, will take styrofoam. Currently, Recommunity, who we had a contract with, would not take styrofoam.
Okay.
So currently, what I did was I provided Recommunity 30-day notice, broke that contract. Currently, we're on basically a day-by-day recipient with them. I would like to find Green Sky or other recipient that would take that styrofoam. They're, as you know, they're big.
It's huge.
Open up anything from Best Buy or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is now. Those big packages of styrofoam, they take up a lot of space, and they never degrade.
Because my question for that is, in our the town planner calendar and our document, information for recycling we received in the past, it doesn't address the styrofoam.
Yeah, I think it's a number 6. It's either 5 or 6 on a plastics 1 through 7. Currently, Recommunity will take plastics 1 through, I believe, 5, don't quote me, and 7. Styrofoam, I believe, is a 6. It could be a 5, but one of them they don't take, but another hauler takes.
Okay, because we say plastics, because we had this debate at my house whether styrofoam was a plastic or not a plastic. Does it get recycled? Doesn't? And I'm like, Sean said it gets recycled.
It is a recyclable plastic,
So,
and like I said, I would like to find a hauler closer than Carlstadt that would take that styrofoam. So again, it becomes a
Now-
return on investment. Do we drive there and drop that off with that extra weight, or do we end up paying for it in the waste stream?
So do we commingle it with the rest, or should styrofoam be put separate?
Good question. As of now, it's I reluctantly say that it's separate and it's a solid
Separate.
waste stream. I don't like that answer. I much prefer to tell you 1 through 7, just clear across the board.
Just
goes
put it
into
in there.
Recycling. I'm trying to work towards that
Okay.
goal, and I've had a little frustration with our old hauler that they wouldn't take that.
Okay, but for now, yes, put the styrofoam, because like you said, I mean, that takes up a lot of room in the garbage can, and and if it can be recycled, it's a much better, much better thing to
agree
do.
with you.
I mean, it doesn't weigh a lot, but it's bulky.
Yeah, and it pops out of the top of your garbage.
Right,
Yeah,
it's bulky, so
it's
obviously,
a
okay.
confusing area, but like I said, there's, in the industry right now, there's 2 haulers, that the predominant haulers, one takes it and one doesn't. I'm trying to get the hauler that will take it to take now.
Okay, so I think if we could get the word out to the public somehow and maybe put it on the mayor's page that we can do styrofoam, on the Facebook page, maybe on the website, maybe with our tax bills that go out, that'll be going out, a little mention that.
Well, hopefully by the time, I think the tax bills go out in August. August would be the...
July.
We're gonna set estimateds probably late June.
Throw it on the
Yeah,
bulletin.
I'm hoping we have
on the
a
board in
clear...
the front.
Yeah, I'm hoping we have a clear-cut answer by then.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Only because one more thing to recycle always makes me very happy.
I'm with you.
Sean, one more question. I know we discussed this, and I know it's maybe in the
Go
plan.
ahead.
I'm sorry. I
That's
just
okay.
followed. Sorry, it's getting late. You said there might be, we're going to work on something at the center itself, which is a mess, to redo the way, because we had these discussions, and I know you got a lot going on.
Well,
Is
Timmy's
there-
aware of it.
is there plans?
One good thing is DPW now, since January, we have weekly staff meetings, we have weekly objectives and goals. I do know that, I believe he'd spoken to you personally, that the dumpster is going to be butted up closer to that,
Right.
hopefully alleviate the need for that extra railing.
Right.
I haven't been able to get out there personally and visit that. Is that still the case?
I missed it this
Problem?
Saturday. I usually go every Saturday, and it was fine. Last time it was fine 2 weeks ago.
Okay,
But
I know that was going to be the short-term remedy.
Right, and then you said you're working hopefully on something bigger plan later on to fix up that whole
the whole
area.
recycling
Is,
center
yeah.
itself, and that's going to follow on the heels of our new recycling contract. We can clean up, probably relay things out there. It's not quite as efficient as we'd like it to be.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a reminder, please go through the chair. Make it easy for Lisa. It's very difficult for her.
Sorry.
Okay, any old business? New business? Jeff, any legal matters?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just 2 items tonight, real quick. Prior to the council meeting tonight, we conducted a real estate closing where the township sold an undersized lot that it owned to an adjoining property owner. This brought a little extra revenue to the township. I'd like to thank Sean and Lisa for their help. The second item real quick is we just got some results that there were only 40 county tax board appeals filed this year. Just to put it in perspective, in prior years we've been in the triple digits. Just to give a comparison to some other towns in Morris County, Florham Park had 72 appeals, Dover had 132, and Lincoln Park, Sean, close your ears, had 172.
Whoa, Lincoln Park, wow.
And he's number 170.
To us, it was encouraging to see how the real estate market in Mount Olive has stabilized, and that's all I have tonight.
Thank you.
Perfect. Very good.
Council reports. Board of Education, Mr. Amianda.
No report.
None? Environmental Committee not here. Senior Citizen, Mrs. Labow.
I have, the only thing to report, basically, they have their spring calendar functions are underway, their day trips. I do know that on June 6th, this is a wonderful event that the Key Club at Mount Olive High School, which Key Club is the teenage age group for the Kiwanis, is once again having their annual senior prom. It's going to be a Western theme, and I know the seniors always look forward to that, so that's going to be on Friday, June 6th. And otherwise, I have nothing to report other than that.
Economic Development Committee.
We meet on April 29th or 30th, at the end of April.
TNR.
TNR, trying to get it set up when we're going to have our spring yard sale, and we haven't decided on an exact date just yet because one of our key members who does a lot of the collections is not available currently due to some, he can't do any heavy lifting, so we have to wait. So I'm not sure when we're going to actually be having that this year. And just recently they're helping out with R&H Farms. They went up and trapped several cats up there that they were, a lot of them they thought were feral, but it turns out they're not, so they're going to get some homes for them. I think only 1 or 2 cats are going back. So the program is still very strong and working great and getting all the free roaming cats off the street and finding them their quote-unquote forever homes.
Thank you. Safety Committee, Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our next scheduled meeting is for the May 21st, where we're going to have a tabletop presentation by Mr. Cerrone. So I'll update everybody after that happens. The MOTV, that seems to be running rather well. I am going to be getting together with Ms. Brett. We're going to have to take a look at the ordinance. When we did that approval, when Councilman Pat Walsh was here, There are some items that I think we ought to be addressing from a different venue. One is, I don't think anybody here would be against the promotion of some of our businesses in town, especially those that donate, to the good, for the different events, places, the Route 46 Chevrolet, Kia, Motion Kia, DTA Automotive, other areas where people are physically taking their business profits and donating them back to the community. At this particular point in time, that is not permitted to be either aired or promoted by the Mount Olive TV by ordinance. So I'm going to be going over that. I will probably try to meet with Ms. Brett, sit down and come up with something that hopefully the rest of the council thinks is more plausible, so that the more things that we can get onto Mount Olive television about Mount Olive and other places, establishments that we all know that participate and contribute back to the community, I would like to see them promoted if at all possible. So that is just something I'll be working on to get back to the council. And again, once I know with the safety committee, Mr. President, what happens at this next tabletop, the goal was to see how the committee works, if it's effective. If not, then I will ask the council to abolish the resolution for what's called the Public Safety Committee, and we will leave that purview entirely with the Office of Emergency Management.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Mr. Roman, Open Space and Recreation Report.
Open Space meets next Monday. On Recreation, I'd like to report that the first annual Sports Summit was held March 26th at the Corner Pub. It was a great turnout for the first annual event. It was organized by our sports ombudsman, former Mayor Paul LaCitra. In attendance were, I would have to say, practically every recreational sport that engages outdoors and some indoor facilities, and some of the corresponding high school coaches. Bridget Geiger and Dan Weiss put on a concussion presentation. Some of their recommendations from there will end up being placed in policy that will probably go before the Recreation Advisory Committee. And I also, I'd be remiss if I didn't also thank Ms. Jill Dagan for helping coordinate the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Board of Health, Mr. Nicastro, and Legislative Committee.
Yep, Board of Health meets next week on the 16th, and I have a meeting with the legislators on April 30th, rescheduled for that date.
Planning Board, our last meeting, we approved Marveland Farms, which is the development across from the golf course with the old horse farm. And I believe Thursday night, the agenda is to the extension for ARD. I'm sure you're all familiar with ARD. I will not be attending Thursday night's meeting. I will be going to that seminar. So, but I will make sure that there's a quorum for the planning board. If there's not a quorum, then I'd have to excuse myself and be at the planning board. Public portion, anyone from the public? If not, I'll close it to the public. Council comments. Mr. Emienda.
I was just going to share with the council members this, that I attended the mayor's breakfast. I attended the mayor's breakfast meeting held at the new Emergency Operations Center located in the Public Safety Training Academy on West Hanover Avenue in Parsippany on Friday, April 4th, 2014. Interactive discussion were about roads, potholes, speed limitation signs, shared library services, and freeholders were very attentive, and they promised to give priorities on road potholes. The chairman of Morris County Chamber of Commerce discussed economic development issues, water allocation, training jobs we have, retaining jobs we have, and attracting new jobs. He urged elected officials to have relationship with private sectors. At the end of the meeting, we were given a walking tour of the new emergency command center funded by FEMA money. It is a very impressive building. The command center, it is a command center for fire, public, weather, medical equipment for the support of towns and communities. And I think the mayor's breakfast was worth attending. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amianda.
Permit me, Mr.
Mrs.
President.
Labow?
Yes, I'd like to say that I'm very disappointed in the discussion tonight with the council members, and that to go forward with this money for the plans for the Flanders sewer project, Mr. Perkins kept stating, and other members, that it's not a health issue. I remember for years now we've spent a lot of money on the treatment of Bud Lake for the milfoil and curly pond weed, which is not a health issue. It was because the boaters who use the lake, the growth was tangling up their motors. That affected only people who use boats. We've spent repeatedly, Sherry, what is it, like $20,000 or $30,000 a year on that treatment?
On the weeding, yeah, it's about that.
Every year for about 5-6 years now. That only affects the people who have boats and who go on the lake. There's not a whole heck of a lot of them. I think it was important to do because it's our community. We want our lake to look nice. We have Mount Playmore, which I am absolutely thrilled with this project. We're putting a lot of money into that project, which is for our community. There's not a lot of people who are going to be using it. Overall, for this study to move forward with the Flanders sewer project, it's not a tremendous amount of money to find out just what we need to do, but it's for the community. We have 2 churches there, we have residents, we have businesses that have asked repeatedly for a number of years to have sewers. Like they stated, everybody around there has sewers. So for this council to say, well, it's not a health issue, we do things for our community to improve Mount Olive Township overall many, many times. We may not all be in agreement on it, but we always take, I've always thought that the council has pretty much looked at, overall we want to improve our community. This was a chance for Flanders, Old Flanders, our only historic section of town, to have sewers that are going to improve the overall area, improve the churches, and just like when Mr. Batch came up and said they want to build a community center at St. E's. In order to have that project go forward, they really need sewers, which is going to reduce the cost. A community center at St. E's, if we have a catastrophic event like Superstorm Sandy, to have a community center that residents on that section of town can go to would be phenomenal. That is a benefit to the entire community, our community, our town. And so, I mean, from now on, if we have a project come up, let's say we decide we're going to repave a road, am I going to say, well, I don't know, is how many people are going to benefit from it, or does it improve our community? I think everybody's very short-sighted on this whole thing. This is something these residents have asked for. 1,600 parishioners at St. Elizabeth's would love to have their community center. I've spoken to the parishioners at the Methodist Church. They want to build their thrift store that they have over there in order to, they have to redo the whole thing because of problems that they're having. To have sewers would be a huge benefit right there to improve. I mean, people go, I mean, Mr. Ferrante's not here tonight, but I remember him saying with their kids, they always go over to that thrift store to get products, you know, different items for their children and their home. It's just like it's the community, it's the overall. And so I just want to say I'm extremely disappointed. I think there was, whatever the reasoning behind it, I am I have never been so terribly disappointed in a group of people in my entire life. So, go ahead, guys. Go ahead and bash me back. It's your turn next.
Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just going to lay this on the line real quick, and it's not a bash. The initial surveys that went out, which went to all of the people down in Old Flanders, the yes votes were 29, the no's were 46. Option number 2, the yes votes were 29, the no's were 47. Subsequent to that, the committee was formed. The project was scaled down to strictly just Park Avenue and to run up a small section of Main Street. So if it was going to benefit the community, it would have benefited the 60 or 70 some odd residents. That would have been a benefit, not 12 or 14. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Roman.
Forgive me for earlier trying to interject. I wanted to jump onto Mr. Ambianda's, the mayor's breakfast. I too attended it with the freeholders, and I'd like to think that it was because of that meeting that many of us there voiced our opinion to the freeholders of the desire to improve the roads, that subsequently the freeholders sought to purchase additional hot boxes. So I'd like to congratulate the
You leaving,
freeholders.
Mrs. Lebo?
I'd
We
like-
didn't adjourn yet. Okay.
I'd like to congratulate the freeholder board for being receptive to our area mayors and council people that attended. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. DeCastro.
Yep, not much for me. I attended one of the meetings as well. I know you were there as well, and it was a very informative and good meeting.
You guys get to go to breakfast.
Nothing much more to say.
I too attended the meeting, and something good came out of the meeting, because I talked to Freeholder Scapicchio about the paving of Flanders Road, that we're gonna have the 5K run there. We don't want people breaking their ankles. And he put me in touch with the woman, and they may not pave the whole road, but they're gonna address the problems right now on that road and get it in shape for the 5K
Path where the
run.
runners are, stay here.
I too was impressed with that safety building. We took the tour. Unbelievable. Really something to talk about. Next, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Mr. Perkins for a job well done this evening with the overview on the sewers. I think you just did an excellent job, and I thank you, Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Also, I've been up on Flanders Necon Road with that project going up, and I just gotta say that the contractor has done his job. He's had a sweeper there constantly going back and forth, sweeping the road. I mean, it's a condition where you're dealing in mud, and, you know, some mud is gonna get on the road, but he's addressed it and done the proper job.
They took America.
That's all I have. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nobody's ever resigned as a